Welcome to Public Health Matters, where we talk about matters of public health. I'm Bobbie Bagley. I'm the Chief Public Health Official and Director for the City of Nashua's Division of Public Health and Community Services. And I'm here today with Matthew Sullivan, who's the Director of Community Development for the City of Nashua. Matthew, welcome.
Thank you so much, Bobbie. Appreciate you having me.
I am very happy to have you join us today. We're going to talk about a lot of very important things that happens out of the Division of Community Development. So can you share a little bit first about yourself?
Sure.
And what made you decide to get into this type of work before you talk about what you're actually doing over in community development?
Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate that question. It's always fun to sort of talk about how I got here because it's a bit of an odd journey. And so I actually went to school for political science and architecture. And at the very end of my schooling, I found this thing called urban planning, which, you know, if I remember back to being a young child, I remember playing with my Legos. In fact, that was some great training for what I ultimately ended up going into, and that is sort of planning and land use development. And so I started my career there, joined the City of Nashua about 5 years ago, coming up on 5 years, as the city's planning director at that point in time, responsible for all of the land use development and sort of the regulatory mechanisms that are in place that produce the development that we have happening in the city right now. I was very fortunate to then be asked by the mayor to step into a new role, and that is the Community Development Division Director for the City of Nashua, which is an entirely different thing. And so within community development, we do a tremendous amount of great work, and I rely on a team of folks that are much smarter and far more expert in the things that they do to accomplish a lot of different things that I know are important to the citizens of Nashua. And so just to provide a quick high-level overview of what those things are, I mentioned sort of planning and land use development. That's a piece of it. In addition, we do all of the cities, or most of the cities, what I would call comprehensive planning, meaning long-term visioning and planning for land use, development, growth, that sort of thing across the city. So we take the lead on a lot of that work and also assist other divisions when they're doing similar efforts. And then we have things like building permitting, whether that's for a residential property owner or for someone else. We are a part of that process and we help them through that. And that goes for all the commercial projects as well going on in the city. We have some, you know, not so fun things, but some necessary things, including our code enforcement function, ensuring that all of the rules and regulations that are in place are being followed. And that's really for, you know, everyone's benefit. If you've had an experience where, you know, something's happening near where you live, or you see something that doesn't look quite right, we're typically involved in resolving that process. And so it's, while it's not the most exciting thing, it's a necessary part of the city's role as a regulatory entity. And then we have a lot of fun things that we do, things that were very new to me when I came into this role, one of which is being responsible for the city's bus system and also the paratransit system that operates in the Nashua region in surrounding communities. I would say, and this is no discredit to any of the other partners or folks in my department, but the bus service is by far the best and most exciting thing that I'm involved with. It's the most impactful thing that we do. When I walk into work every day, I walk by the transit center, and it's a bustling sort of epicenter or hub of activity in downtown. And in a serious note, you know, those who rely on public transportation here in the city of Nashua or choose to take public transit, they typically need it. And so it's a very important and core service to the city. And we're very fortunate in Nashua to have that be a city-controlled service. And we do a great job with it. Camille Correa, the transit administrator, does a fantastic job running that service, and we're really, really proud of the work that it does to connect people to places that they need in their lives. And then a couple other fun things. We're actually responsible for what we call community power. It's the way that most customers in the city of Nashua actually purchase electricity. We played a huge role, and Doria Brown, our energy manager, really led this to enter a cooperative power program about a year ago, and it's been going great. We've saved the paying customers in Nashua millions of dollars on their electricity rates. And so I don't know how that ended up under me, but it's a really great service that we're offering and a way that the city provides value, I think, that I'm really proud of. And then finally, we have an emergent sort of sustainability department that's doing a lot of great work in the community as well. They're working really hard on identifying strategies and sort of long and short-term strategies to really limit the city's energy usage, both at the municipal level and out in the public as well. And so all those things combined make up community development. But I just say in closing that all of the decisions that we make or the things that we're doing are really community driven. We work really hard to engage stakeholders, both those who are taxpayers here, but also those who visit or who work here, really because we want to have the best strategies that are representative of all of their different goals, objectives, and interests. And so we really work really hard to make everything sort of a grassroots project, and I think a lot of our work is hopefully emblematic of that.
Yeah, it is. And with all of those things that you just talked about, all of those things help build a resilience in a community.
Absolutely.
Involving community members as far as their input, engaging partners and businesses. That's all a part of the wholesomeness of a community that reflects resiliency in its development and its sustainability as well.
Absolutely, and I think we're fortunate in New England and particularly in Nashua to be grappling with the challenge of being a very attractive community. And we'll talk about this, I know, in a few minutes, but we have tremendous housing challenges, but I think it's important to keep in mind that those challenges exist because the city is doing great things. And that's both the work that your division does, certainly the work that our division does and that the mayor's leadership has produced. But to your point, a more resilient community is absolutely something we need to be working towards. We want to be here for a long time and doing great things as a city, and it's only through the work that we do and the partnership with others that are doing equally important work that I think we'll get to that. So I think that's well said. Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that we look to in partnering, because a part of our role at the Division of Public Health and Community Services is that we promote the well-being and the preserving of the health and well-being of the public. Housing and all the components of your divisions, Matt, align very nicely with what we call the social determinants of health.
Absolutely.
So these are conditions in which people live that will help them either thrive or not. Yeah. Right? That will help them either be more successful in their ability with their housing, to go from a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom, depending on their marital status, depending on their social economic status, depending on what they want to do and how their family grows and all those things. And so what the work that you do in your division aligns with what we look to help educate and inform people in our community about. So for instance, like the housing. And I know that you said that the code is not the most attractive part of the work that you all do, but it is very, very important because it aligns with what we do through our environmental health department and the health officer. When certain complaints come in, if it's related to housing, apartments, rental units, there's a place where there's an intersection between what our health officer and deputy health officer does along with code enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm glad you're emphasizing that because you couldn't be more right. I mean, there's the idea of creating more housing, but there's also this equally critical thing, and that is ensuring that existing housing stock across the city for all incomes is safe. It's of a relatively high quality, and that's an ongoing challenge. As you know, we have an aging community, not just from a population perspective, but from a building stock perspective, and so it's a constant journey to try and get property owners to put money back into their properties, therefore enabling the tenants to really, I think, have opportunities to do two things. One, be housing stable, of course, but to also be housing mobile, right? It's not just the ability to feel comfortable in the place you're in, it's being able to take that next step, to your point. And that's really hard right now, and I know we'll talk about this for the next few minutes of conversation, but both those things are under threat for a variety of different reasons, both in Nashua and in the entire New England region. Folks are not able to sort of go through the continuum of having access to different housing opportunities as their lives change, whether it's getting into a relationship, then having a family, and then downsizing. That's been really hard over the last few years for a variety of different reasons, but certainly the just core idea of having high quality housing stock that's safe is really important.
Right. And our departments have worked together over the I want to say over the decades, even before you came.
Yeah, absolutely.
Heidi, who's our health officer, and I, before we were in the roles that we're in right now, were a part of the team that did work with your HUD department for lead. So Housing Urban Development, you have a nice grant for lead abatement work. And we were a part of doing some of that effort as well, because we did some of the home visits.
Yeah.
and would make those connections. And so that's another, like, again, overlap. So the two
Absolutely.
divisions work really, really closely together.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to Julian, our director of urban programs, for not mentioning urban programs and the great work that they do and the partnership that we've had with public health on the lead side of things. You know, not only have we worked very closely to execute lead remediation projects across the city in more than 100 housing units, but we've also done a lot of prevention work too.
Correct.
In partnership with each other, and I think there's a bright future there. We're always seeking more grant funding to make sure that program is stable long into the future, but I think that partnership should be celebrated, and I know that we sort of share the continued passion for working on that, because that is, back to the idea of aging housing stock, that's one of the critical direct life safety issues that's out there, and I know it's a high priority for both of us. So hope it continues into the future.
Yeah. And it will. I mean, and even if so we have to, as a part of some of the funding that we get from the state, continue with looking at the follow-up of children if they're identified as living in a home where there might be lead, or there's the case of some lead ingestion and what we would call lead poison now, because the allowable amount of lead has gone down. We're down to, like, I think we're at 5 now. We were it's been going down over the 20 some odd years that I've been in public health, and now it's down to 5, and it's going to get down to 3, because no amount of lead in a child's body is healthy. And so we've got these nice programs that we have in place. So I know that those will continue to go on, because those are huge public health issues, because there are other implications as a result of lead poisoning with the developmental issues that come out of that. They've done some studies that also have shown that some individuals who have high rates of crime, they've looked at some of these individuals to see if there was a lead poisoning involvement early on that could have resulted in some of these behaviors. You lose IQ points as well. And so this will always be something that our divisions are going to be working on together for addressing that particular issue. You don't want to keep sending the canaries, the children, into the mines, the houses.
Absolutely. And I think we're constantly, we apply for these HUD lead grants that are substantial, $5 million here, $5 million there, on a 3 to 4 year basis. And we always get this question from HUD of need. And you would think that you're sort of chipping away at things and making a dent, but in fact there are two things that fight against that. One, we have this tremendously old housing stock, a lot of which contains lead paint. But number two, as you just noted, the standards are dropping, and for really good reason. We have a lower threshold, and that triggers more units being included. And so the need persists. And so we're about to get into a HUD grant process right now to get our next grant. And so certainly for our HUD folks out there, the need continues. And with Bobbie's team and what you're doing that identification piece. That's also really critical for us. That's another pipeline into our program that we're really, really thankful for. Yeah.
So talking about pipelines into programs.
Yeah.
So we have, as you mentioned, our housing stock. We have a lot of units going up, Matt.
We do.
So let's talk about that.
Sure.
And in some towns, we've actually learned, that some towns are actually communicating, or they're posting, like, how many units are going up. How transparent do we want to be in Nashua with regards to the community knowing, like, how many units are going up, where they're going up, and the availability or accessibility of those units to people in our communities?
Yeah, I mean, like anything, as transparent as possible. And I think, first of all, commend the efforts of other communities, some as close as Manchester, and Jeff Belanger, the planning director there, he's run a great program of sort of doing a regular update to the elected officials and to the public of what's happening. We've got to do a better job of that, no question. I know it's something that we're both thinking about, because we have this newly created housing services officer position. I know LaTanya spoke on this just a few weeks ago, I think. She and I have started to talk about what that public-facing, I'll call it a housing portal, might look like.
Yeah.
And honestly, from a selfish perspective, we're constantly getting inquiries about different projects, the affordability, the number of units, when they're going to be online. This would be one place where the community could find out all of that information, and it would be updated dynamically as projects are changing. So I think that's the dream. It's very much something that we'd like to do over the coming, I would say, 6 months to a year. And we have all of the tools in place to do it. And I know that for sort of our planning and land use folks, they also want the community to be aware. I mean, we take the traditional steps of notifying the public and putting it in the newspaper, but we're trying to find new ways to actually connect with folks. It's a little old-fashioned what we're doing, and it's not the best way to get out to the community. And I think the reality is that we are seeing unprecedented levels of development, and that success should be celebrated. So there are a lot of really good reasons to do exactly what you're saying. We've just got to put the resources behind it, and I think we're committed to doing that. I'll just talk quickly about the development pipeline, if that's something you might want to hear about.
And right now, so what's the number of units that are going up right now?
So actively under construction, we have, and I'll include what I would call recently occupied units. We have a 150 unit downtown development that was just recently occupied. We have the Monahan Manor project by the Housing Redevelopment Authority that's recently been occupied, or it's incrementally being occupied. We have about 750 housing units currently under construction in the city in various stages.
And in various areas.
In various areas, absolutely. Most of those are multifamily. We do have some single-family sort of home developments, but those are lower on the unit count than the larger projects. But we also have this other category, and that's about 1,000 units that are approved by the planning board, but are not yet under construction. And that's while it's great, it's a concern for us. We have these, what we refer to as entitlements out there that are projects that are ready to build, but they're not moving forward for one reason or another. And there are a lot of factors there. But I think we should be really happy with the 750 units that are currently coming online. We're in a situation where we're at less than 1% vacancy. We're at about 0.6 right now. These units are not going to suddenly create percentage points of vacancy, but what they will do is they'll free up some space for folks that are sort of on the bubble that are hoping to move into different units, and those outside the community that are hoping to move in. So I think there will be real impacts, but I'd also say that there's sort of this myth out there that more units will immediately create affordability. It's not the case, particularly when you're in an attractive community like Nashua. We have so much demand that you really have to get significantly more built to drive down prices. We are such a, I'll use the colloquial term, hot real estate market right now, that we're going to buck trends of sort of diminished affordability with more units. And so we have to be doing other things as a community to create affordable housing. We're doing some things on that front that we can talk about. But I think we should be relatively happy with the amount of unit construction that's going on. It's a sign of a good regulatory process, I'd say.
And Nashua, as the gate city, is always going to be attractive.
Absolutely.
When we moved to the Northeast, we lived in Massachusetts, in Acton, Mass, for about a year. When we went to buy a home, New Hampshire was more attractive because Massachusetts, you didn't get much land around your house, but you were going to pay, for the home. So when we came across the border, we moved. The first house that we actually built was in Litchfield. We had a whole acre. So you weren't getting that in Massachusetts, right? And so Nashua is always, as the gate city, it's always going to be attractive because I was still working in Massachusetts at the time. So to live here and just jump right on 93 or Route 3 to get down to Massachusetts was ideal. And it's such a nice place to come back to. So when we talk about like our strategy for increasing housing, affordable housing, what's our plan? Because as you said, 0.6 vacancy rate, we're building, we've got 700 units plus, coming on board, but we're also going to always be attracting folks to Nashua.
So the plan has several components to it, and it involves a multitude of different agencies and jurisdictions that have to be involved to be successful. But I would say on sort of the regulatory side of things, and that really for us, that is the most important piece. Your regulatory environment will either create or it will disincentivize the creation of housing. We currently have a very favorable regulatory environment, which is why I think we're seeing the development that we are. But where, again, I think we have some issues is when it comes to affordable housing. Because of the attractiveness of the community, for the developer, they're less likely to do affordable housing because affordable housing is harder to do for a developer. That is a reality.
Can you explain
Yeah.
that though? So why is it harder?
It's harder.
If the demand is there, why is it harder?
It's harder because developers generally rely on a certain level of profitability when it comes to doing a development. And while many are certainly making a significant amount of money, their margins are tighter than you might think. And so what happens is if they're depending on what I would refer to as market rate units or traditionally priced units, and then they're asked to do affordable units that are basically capped in the amount they can charge, that actually has really significant impacts on what we call their pro forma, the way that they're collecting cash in a project. And so you have to sort of find the sweet spot when it comes to what percentage of a development you're requiring or asking to be affordable and what their cash flow looks like. And so, I beat this drum often, but I mean it, and that is that we have to work with the development community to create affordable housing.
We do.
If you don't, you will create systems and regulations that don't make sense, and therefore you will stymie development. And so one project that we're working on right now is we have what's referred to as an inclusionary zoning ordinance, which is an affordable housing requirement across the city. We did that 2 years ago. It includes formulas that actually produce a level of affordability in projects. But in those 2 years, things have changed tremendously. And so that affordability requirement is already sort of out of balance with what the market can do right now. And so we're hearing real concerns, and they're legitimate, from the development community about their ability to do affordable housing.
Is there any way to have or bring into some of the conversation, Matt, the importance of addressing the need that we have in Nashua?
Yeah.
Because we're always going to be an attractive place for people to come, right? And so is there a way for us to get what I would call almost a win-win out of this, right? That we're meeting the housing need of those who can't afford market rate, and at the same time creating housing that is affordable for our workforce, right?
Yeah.
Because there's also that workforce housing that's in there. And then also have what I would call the higher end housing for folks that can't afford that.
I think there are strategies that we can be successful with, and I think one of you're giving me a great opportunity to talk a little bit about the Housing Trust Fund as well. But I'll talk about the role that might play. But one thing I would say generally is we need to move away from the idea of sort of low-income housing developments and market rate developments. We really, across the board, need to strive to have housing development that has a continuum of incomes within it. And there are a lot of, going back to the sort of the social determinant of health perspective, there's a lot of data out there to support the idea that folks that grow up in a mixed income environment are achieve greater success.
I've read some of that, right?
And
I believe it, right? Because then it takes away that whole broken window syndrome, right?
Exactly. And so that exposure to a variety of incomes and different cultures and perspectives is so important. And so I think we really need to focus on that. And the way that we do it, because the funding is sort of limited out there as far as grants and other things in the grant world, the city needs to step up. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. The city created a housing trust fund several years ago, or recreated the housing trust fund, put aside $10 million and a little bit of change to sort of provide gap funding to drive projects towards that mixed income typology.
Nice.
And I'm really excited that that is going to be a piece of that puzzle that you referred to. It's not going to address everything.
Right. But it'll at least get us started, right? And Monahan Manor is an example of this. Is that correct?
It is. It's a huge step forward, and I want to commend the Housing Redevelopment Authority for their partnership on that. 10 of those units of the 216 are market rate, so you do have some income mix. But we'd love to have a broader mix than that.
Right.
I think, and this is not to say that pure sort of lower income developments should not happen. They absolutely should, but they should be spread around the city.
Correct.
And they should have this mixed income. And so I think Monahan Manor is a huge step forward. It's also sort of a replicable model for other projects. And I know that the Housing Authority is thinking about future work as well. I think there's a great opportunity to partner with them, involving a little bit of city funding to get even more mix and create an even more dynamic environment in which these folks can have an opportunity to live and sort of also move through the continuum of housing without having to leave.
Right.
That's a huge piece of it.
Because
And
people actually do like living in Nashua.
absolutely. And they may like living in their specific development. So the idea that you suddenly have to move out because you are successful at work or you have a life circumstance that changes, if we can try to eliminate that, I think that's pretty cool. It gets me excited thinking about it.
No, it is cool.
Yeah.
And I think that our viewers will also appreciate the fact that that is something that's being taken into consideration. Right?
Yeah.
Because people, once they establish their roots, they like to stay there. People don't like to be uprooted.
Absolutely.
No matter what level of income you have, people do not like to be uprooted. And so if we can create that, like you said, that sweet spot, that would be awesome.
Well, I hope we can figure that out.
Well, we're going to work on it, right? So
we're
like
definitely
you said,
working on it.
We have this new position, our housing services officer, that actually works under both of our divisions. So that public health perspective is in there to, again, always keep at the forefront, you know, the drivers of health. And so housing is a huge component of health, and housing stability is a huge component from the babe all the way to, I don't want to say the grave, but from the babe all the way up to our oldest population dweller, right? You've got to have stable housing to be able to maintain your health and your well-being and community.
Absolutely, and I think that, you know, you and I saw that crossover and that relationship when the position was created, and I think we're only going to learn more about that relationship as we, you know, sort of LaTanya comes on board and starts to see all these different perspectives, and she's providing tremendous support to the Housing Trust Fund Committee.
Yes.
Yep. She's also providing tremendous support to some of the unhoused conversations happening across the city, which are a piece of this, of course.
Right. And a development of a whole strategic plan on how we're going to address the issue.
And that's the other answer to your question you asked about a plan. I mean, we don't necessarily have a housing plan as a city. We did a housing study that I think laid out a lot of strategies, but number one, that needs updating, and number two, I think that housing stability plan that you're working on developing is a huge piece as well. So there's just so much excitement on the horizon, and I'd love to talk more about this, you know, in a future conversation as well.
It's been such a pleasure having you here, and I'm quite sure that all of our viewers learned something today. First of all, about all the things that are happening in the Division of Community Development, how public health and community development is intertwined and always will be, right? All the work that you're doing is always going to be intertwined with public health. Public health is going to be a layer across everything.
Yeah.
Because everything is really about how well we can promote, preserve, and protect the health of our communities. And that's going to come through all the work that all of us are doing together.
Well, I'm so appreciative of the opportunity to talk about this today. And we, you know, our divisions are chameleons in a way. We're sort of going to adapt and change to what the needs are in the community. And I think when I think about even just the titles, we can sort of make it what we want. And I think I'm just really excited to continue our partnership on these efforts moving forward.
Well, thank you. So glad to have had you today.
Thanks, Bobbie.
I'm Bobbie Bagley, reminding you to have a great day today and a better day tomorrow. See you next time on Public Health Matters.